to Coastside Poetry. Thanks to those of you who've Zoomed in and those who are watching on YouTube. We meet either physically or virtually on the second Tuesday of every month to celebrate spoken word poetry. I'm Diane Moomey, and Steve Long and I are your hosts this evening. Our featured poet event is being recorded and streamed live onto YouTube as we speak. So anyone can look at it later. We'll be posting the link on our website, coastsidepoetry.org. This evening, we welcome local poet Casey FitzSimons. Casey is a frequent reader at San Francisco Bay Area venues. Her poems have appeared in print and online in Massachusetts Review, Red Wheelbarrow, Midwest Quarterly, Newport Review, Mezzo Cammin, and others. She has placed first in poetry at Mendocino Coast Writers Conference and Ina Coolbrith's Circle, second at the Soul Making Keats Sonnet Competition, and the Maggie H. Meyer Contest, sponsored by Bay Area Poets Coalition. And she's been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She's published 16 chapbooks, most recently, More Than I Can Stand to Know in 2018, and Listening for Prophecies, 2019. I've heard a rumor that she's working on another one. Please welcome Casey FitzSimons.
Okay, needed to unmute my thing. Can you hear me all right? How about Muriel? Is Muriel doing okay? She said she could not hear. I'm not hearing from Muriel. Okay.
Muriel, can you wave if you can hear Casey?
Well, maybe Steve can work with her in that. Now I cannot hear you, Diane.
That's because I muted myself. Because it's your turn now.
Okay. All right.
All is good.
Okay. You know, usually folks, I read my mawkish relationship poems to you, but I decided today to give you a piece of what's going on in my poetry life. I've been taking stock of various poems that I've written about my family. I guess I want to have my poetic output have the character of a biography to some extent, maybe, I'm not sure. But I'm starting with my father, poems about him, how his Army career affected me, which is badly, and what that says about me, and which episodes of our joint lives I've included and what I've left out. What's strange is, you know, I have about 1,500 poems, and about 1,000 of those are in my books. Another 150 are in journals and things like that. I have about 250 poems about my father, so to pick 10 to read tonight was no small thing. What I wonder about is what I've left out, if I've got a decent balance of fond memories and negativities. And yet any one person is only reading one poem at a time anyway, so perhaps that doesn't even matter. Anyway, I included very little in the way of childhood per se. my first poem is called Jelly Bean Stories. Once upon a time, there was a blue jelly bean and a yellow jelly bean. They fell in love, got married, and had lots of little green jelly beans. In his stories, I can always guess and tell what happens next. Then he's gone, and every night he's gone, I earn a heavy silver coin. My mother drops it in the jar. After kissing me goodnight, at first they clank against the glass and later they just click, a higher pitch. He whispers now, back with stories from his collar, smelling of sweat. It mushrooms black, the cloud of him, welling where he kneels, hiding my mother. In his stories, I can guess, tell what happens next. He tugs the feet, he says, and they are cool. I see them angled out. The teardrop heals. Under ridgepoles, faceless, somewhere there's a girl. Thatch, her grass skirt smoking. I feel them sleeping hot, my sister's feet. Her pillow at the other end, we share the bed. It smokes, the ceiling, my mother passing. The bayonet of light threatens, packs and ammo rattling, fire crackling, half shapes of men peering, their rifles up. My mother checking at the door, kicks a honey bucket, spilling, it sizzles. He stands and takes more quarters from the jar. So that's a poem about my father returning from Korea. I might have been about 4 years old and have only fragmented ideas about that and put those into the poem. He was a good father for a while, and then he began deteriorating. And when I was about 12, he was a full-fledged smoker and alcoholic. We lived in 3 different cities in Germany, being moved around by the army because my father was misbehaving. They would just move him to a different duty station. We lived in 3 different cities. And then finally that escalated to his being sent back to the United States, hospitalized at Bethesda, Maryland. The Sky Blue Ribbon is a poem. It mentions 2 things. KO, C-A-O is an acronym, stands for Casualty Assistance Officer. It's somebody the Army gives a family as a help aid in crisis. And I mentioned K-Town, which really is Kaiserslautern, Germany. And that's what we always called it, K-Town. The Sky Blue Ribbon they gave him for Korea snagged itself in the dark, deep inside his uniform jacket, on the crossed cannon insignia of field artillery. It was folded, lining out the jacket, salt rings dried below still damp half moons of sweat. That's how I imagined it. My father's coat, riding on the crooked arm of the KO, floating above the tarmac, rising into the chopper that had airlifted him to K-Town, him in a straitjacket on a gurney already on board. That whole scene shimmered behind a hologram, a faint rainbow of battle ribbons, the silhouettes of hunkered, round helmeted men, slide trombones wagging side to side behind a drum line, and stripes waving in the heat, rippling up from the asphalt. I imagined all that and picked out the slim silences between the thwap, thwap, thwap of slowly rotating blades. My mother had cried on the brass leaves of the major, quartered with his own big family next door. Recruited him to say why we'd be moving again. I didn't ask him in, only watched a small navy of clouds cruising through his thinning buzz cut. Now don't you take a hard nose to your father, he'd said. And what I'd said back was, why ever not? But it wasn't a question, only an epithet. In my last couple of years in high school, back in the United States, family life, my life, consisted of avoiding my father, contending with him. My mother visited with neighbors if he passed out at night. I would stay home, watch the kids, and just be there if something horrible happened, and things did. He made 3 suicide attempts in my senior year of high school, and each time I went across the bridge in an ambulance and got interviewed at Letterman Hospital and so on like that. This poem is called Chenille. Chenille, fluffier than scudding clouds, somewhere I've seen. Pink vomit runnels, ketchup, creamed corn, gray bumps of ground beef, ground again between his square teeth. Pills studding the mess like candies in cake batter. Rolling, the brown plastic bottle trailing an arc of gunk to the closet door ajar. Refilled often with some brand X or other, kept from a while back party, standing now on the floor, the Smirnoff bottle. Humid the air is, sour, smoky, angling down into a half-inch of new ash and a dozen butts, cigarette still burning. Face down on my mother's side of the bed, nearer the door, barely rousing, he says, "Help me up, won't you, honey?" Into the crook of his arm, where I am not. He doesn't see me. We're all his honeys. I'm the veteran of many ambulance rides with my father. This is called Golden Gate. Bridge lights, yellow, not white, illuminate the roadway barely, not bright as day. From inside the ambulance, no bridge, no rails or cables, just these wan and bleary glow balls lobbed, strobing from the city side. Awkward on the pull-down seat, feet tucked, I look away from him, strapped and insensible. Tubes, latex hands, light bleached interior of the van. At the back, porthole gaskets sealed against receding complacency, backwash of slowed cars close again behind us, carried in the wake of speed. Not my first trip. Swaying loops, cords, and tubes move to the pulse of contingency, measure urgency, mark time when only time abides. Forced ceremonial swag, horses' reins, aigulets, a king's cortege. I remember hope without an object. Think of a horse well trained in step with pageantry. This trip in charge of protocol, I am official mourner draped in fringe and tassel of due concern. Escape to ambient darkness of night, of water below the invisible bridge. Count hooves clopping on the cobblestones. Often when I got to the hospital, there was no one to take care of a teenage daughter, you know, but they would get me in there and interview me, ask me what was the matter with my father and what I knew about him. Strange questions. Usually I knew a great deal. This scene, I call this poem Interview, is at Letterman General Hospital on the Presidio of San Francisco in 1964. That's my senior year of high school. Affliction, accident, acts of war. To assuage them, this huge hospital, wide hallways for once urgent processions of mercy's business. Now, appropriated without remodeling, a warren of alcoves among movable room dividers, shirred curtains and rusting tubular frames. The doctor has a desk here in this strange, ill-defined space. Hall, drafty, below a high ceiling. Everyone has a red, runny nose. Sounds are muffled, softly quadrupled like cathedral prayers, echoing against distant marble, absorbed by paper and stacked linen. Words scuttle between pairs of passing eyes, assiduously averted. I imagine our audiograms serrated by the rasp of whisper, the rumbling of wheeled carts. There is tacit agreement that we are not overheard. The red-haired doctor props an elbow on my father's foot-thick file. He wants a quick précis about our home life. He is above validating my pain, but I am past pain. I can tell he's used to exercising authority, interprets my passivity as respect. I sense suppressed delight in the complexity of the case. Yet the warm vapors of confidence condense in the chill of crisis. He wipes his glasses with fresh tissue that softs from the box, polishes a theory. He is a peacetime general, exhilarated at the prospect of war, made suddenly aware that his strategies are theoretical. His gun, shiny but unloaded. Visit to the ward. There were many times that I was called upon to visit my father in the hospital. Usually my mother was with me, but on this occasion, different. He narrowed his eyes and he made a sound when the doctor turned. "Come here," the doctor said to me. I was young, but held my ground. Naive, but the doctor was naiver still. My father glared at me again. "I'm proud of her," he said, "and this time I will." But his voice drifted off and up. "He's tired," the doctor said, then asked, "Where's your mother?" "I drove myself," I lied. "It's she who's tired." The sun shined cold on the sunroom floor. I wasn't old enough to sign him out. "Fuck you," my father said, heading back to the ward. My mother waited in the idling Ford. The Army did not let my father re-up at the 20-year point. He was eligible for retirement, and essentially they forced that on him. He had a master's degree in English from Columbia, so he went around trying to get jobs as an English professor. I was dismayed when he ended up teaching at the same school I was attending. I was just starting college, so this was USF, my first year in college, my father's first year of retirement. This poem is called Dad and I at USF, Fall, 1964. The dean wants to read a sample of articles about the communist threat that Dad lists under publications. Every last one is classified top secret. The faith box, agnostic / unaffiliated, is blacked in on my registration. My father is hired as a Catholic scholar. They send me on retreat. In the free box at St. Ignatius, Dad finds a Norfolk jacket in threadbare corduroy with faux suede elbow patches. He wears it every day. Classmates call my father Professor. He must like that. Perky, curly-haired 19-year-olds studying dead poets. Chatting and card playing go on in the language lab cubicles. Dad teaches English and American history and doesn't use the lab, but he reports it. He eats tuna sandwiches at his desk with the door locked during office hours. His trash can is full of smelly wads of wax paper and dill pickles. His briefcase is stuffed with student papers. Every one of them has the title Inverted Syntax in Selected Poems by W.H. Auden. His bookshelf has stacks of unreturned student essays, a copy of Bruce Catton's A Stillness at Appomattox, and a desiccated African violet in a plastic pot. My retreat is entitled Better to Marry Than to Burn. The moderator is an old Jesuit who drinks and watches TV in the blue-windowed rectory. We used to call the rectory at USF My Blue Heaven. It was the televisions on behind all the windows at night. Things reach an end point in my parents' marriage at some stage. This is called Decree. This is a new poem. I have a couple of new poems in here. decree, before no fault. Her, him, me, my husband, the lawyers. We met downtown at the courthouse for the hearing on my mother's suit for divorce. Outside, cable cars, traffic noise, rain. My husband paid her lawyer, tried to be reassuring. You'll get over it, get a woman friend. You'll see, you'll never testify. Life will just go on. My father wouldn't speak to me. He knew. She told her lawyer, who told his lawyer, and his lawyer told him. Mental cruelty, proof could be offered. An adult daughter was ready to testify. Just answer questions, hon. Don't offer anything. Don't take sides. His belly flopped over his belt, stretched over his belly, yellowing Orlon turtleneck and a peace symbol on a leather thong. He had a missing tooth, long greasy hair. She was thin, dressed like Jackie Kay, 3 kids still at home. She wanted half his pension and child support. He'd failed sales and secured transactions again at law school, and he was on probation. He cried, he begged, he wanted to come home. He'd stop drinking and go to AA meetings. She was the love of his life, he claimed. He wanted the West Point lithographs from over the couch. He'd already taken the green box of family photos. She wanted the house, the car, the insurance policy, the Macy's bill paid, the pictures back. The judge wouldn't hear witnesses, gave my mother everything she asked for. My father got restricted visitation. The gavel banged the bench louder than the cable car clanged. Rush hour had started. The rain had stopped. The judge told my mother he felt sorry for her. Until she sold the house, 6 lithographs hung over the couch. Each of us older girls got 2. I'm using the frames for other stuff. The prints are in a portfolio somewhere. I was born at West Point. From there, it was a downward spiral. This is a poem I wrote called Elegy to My Father. Is it Elegy on, Diane? I can't remember. Elegy to.
All I know is elegy written in a country churchyard.
That's it. Okay.
That's
Well,
the extent of mine.
this elegy has to do with my father. With what little time I spent wondering, I wonder what path he thought he was on, my father, once he got away from home, because he flunked out, party boy, out of his Stanford football scholarship. He joined the army. I could write the script. And to spite his father, a man who joined the Navy as deckhand at age 12 in 1900. They did that back then. A private for a year, my father was, before they sucked him in at West Point The core and the core and the core. A fraternity mocked by us three girls simply being born. And him getting found in math and walking the quad playing chess in his head, pawn to queen's 4. And what did all that Milton mean? God's ways to man addressed? And those writing prizes once he got lost from paradise and all else? Justified somehow, sitting at the wireless in Reykjavik, Iceland, tinting maps at Leavenworth, polishing brass on the edge of his bed wherever he slept, walking the Pentagon's obtusely cornered halls to an olive drab steel desk, his gaze on Arlington. A security risk, wanted gone. He'd made a mess of things and they were good and done with him. We all were. And done with himself, delusions sun-dried on the very field where reveille played out from a microphone to the matted grass, to dandelions mashed on the way to the PX. He tries to get tenure at USF, but already Malt's done more than Milton could. The epic beginning in medias res, rhetoric preying on vanity. We find the stairwells spattered with blueberry pie, the tin on a step, the cigarette in the couch doused in urine. He has a stroke in his sleep and dies. So thank you folks very much. I will indeed eventually have another book. Usually I do my books in December, but health prevented that this year. And I will get to it. And those of you who ordinarily get a book from me every year will get this one eventually. If you don't get a book but want one, if you want to be on that Get Stuff from Casey list, I guess, Diane, the thing to do is ask people to put their emails in the chat or...
Yes, put all your information in the chat, and then at the end I will save the chat and send it to Casey as a notepad file. So anything you want to say, your addresses and all of that.
Yeah, that would be great. If I have your mailing address also, then I'll know you want a book and I will send it free of charge to you. Better that I have readers than money. That's the objective there.
Yes.
But anyway, thanks for listening. I hope I didn't go over too much here, Diane.
You're fine. Thank you so much. And now
Okay.
I invite everyone to unmute and speak.
Casey, I read a poem of yours a long time ago of a boy, end of the day, and a saw and an accident. And I can't remember, I can't find my copy of the poem. Do you recall that?
A poem I wrote
About a young man, working with a saw. And he has an accident. Does that ring a bell to you?
No, not working with a song. Not those two together. My brother was killed in an accident, and it fell to me to tell my father that his first son had died. It was a miserable chore.
That may have been the poem.
That was one of the poems that I had to let go of for this reading.
Okay. Do you recall the name of it?
The name of that poem? My brother was killed in an accident, and it fell to me to tell my father that his first son had died. It was a miserable chore.
That may have been the poem.
that was one of the poems that I had to let go of for this reading.
Okay. Do you recall the name of it?
The name of that poem, my brother was killed in an accident, and it fell to me to tell my father that his first son had died. It was a miserable tour.
That may have been the poem.
I have a lot of different poems about the accident. This reading. And they're in all different books.
Casey, you went to school with Priscilla Presley, was it?
Yes, I did, in fact.
Yeah.
She was in Germany when I was in Germany. She had met Elvis, and he had gone back to the United States just as I showed up there.
Were there brighter moments along the way?
With my father, you mean?
Well, yes.
No, not too many. I think when I was a kid, I remember playing hide and seek with him. And of course, he was a heavy man, very fat, large man. He couldn't have fit anywhere, but I never found him. So I don't know what that was like. But that's about all I remember. My father was pretty much a ne'er-do-well.
You never know what the war can do.
Yeah. It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Casey, you had a number of professions, teaching and so on, and I forget exactly what you had done. Math and art and a whole bunch of things, didn't you?
Yeah. I forget too, David. Yeah, I have a degree in math from Berkeley, and a degree in art, master's degree from San Jose State. I went to law school. In fact, I did not know my father was at Hastings Law School already when I enrolled. So there were two schools where he and I were together. That was so strange.
Wow.
Somebody, when I was in law school, somebody came to me and said, "You were in Herb Cain this morning." And of course, I thought, yeah, for what? Well, my dad had managed to do something, I'm not sure what, and yeah.
There. Would anyone else like to say something before we stop the recording?
Thank you so much, Casey. Your poems are incredibly powerful and moving, and I just applaud your courage and your resilience and your ability to write about the pain of the past with great power and beauty. Thank you very much, Casey.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. That's a nice thing for you to say. I think that it's not courage, it's just desperation. If I didn't talk about past pain, I don't know what there would be to talk about. But yeah, my father was a serious problem. And what's interesting to me as I was looking this stuff over today, my father's been dead for over 40 years. And he's still very much a piece of my consciousness. So I'm not sure how many nice times there were past, let's say, the age of 9 or 10, but I certainly think about my father. He was a very smart man, a clever man, but he was a showboater, a boaster, always creating problems.
I so admire the your choice of detail. I think every poem had, you know, several to quite a few details, but they're chosen so beautifully. It all, you know, came to me like a picture, and the whole mood was in those details. I really enjoyed
Oh,
that.
thank you, Susan. Thank you.
Casey, your poems are moving and extraordinary as always. It does take courage to be honest about painful memories, and you do that, and it's inspiring. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there are things, though. I often ask myself, why did I not do more to help my father? But I was so young. I mean, all of those suicide attempts were, I didn't even know what Alcoholics Anonymous was when I was 16, 17 years old. And of course, when you're in the Army, people don't realize how sheltered you are. You never meet anybody who has been divorced, for instance, because once a couple is divorced, they drop out of the system entirely. You don't know anything. And I think that it wasn't until I was an adult, truly past college, that I had any idea that my father might have been helped if some of these doctors weren't so naive about it or whatever.
Well, children don't know anything, but some, like you, will rise to the occasion and just do what needs to be done from within the context of what you can do.
What I know how to do, yeah.
in the world. So those are very adult burdens that were put on you.
Yeah. Oh yes, and maybe the other thing that I noticed about this, I'm the second child of a large family. There are 6 kids in my family, and none of them were really involved.
Mm. Yeah, it's usually one,
Yeah.
the chosen one. So talking about Casey's many degrees and talents and professions and gifts, I got to know Casey as a fearsome executive editor at a mathematics publishing company. So that's another check.
Yeah.
Fearsome executive editor.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I was a little afraid, but I learned a lot.
FEE.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Casey, and thank you all of you for being here and for giving your voices and letting us all be together here. We'll stop recording now. Those of you in the Zoom room, please stay online if you'd like to take part in the open mic. Thanks to all of our YouTube listeners. Please tune in for our next regular Coastside Poetry event on Tuesday, March 9th, when we'll welcome another Bay Area poet, J. David Cummings. That brings us to the end of tonight's program. Thanks so much for joining us at Coastside Poetry and for helping to keep the lamps of poetry burning.